Again, my friends, we are here to teach you a little lesson. One of my childhood ambitions was to be a teacher. I taught one half day as a substitute teacher one time. That was the extent of my teaching. But here in my older days, shall we say, I'm having the privilege of teaching again. Teaching Bristol history, and actually I prefer ancient Bristol history. Frankly, I lose interest when I reach the date 1900. Of course, a lot of things have happened since 1900. And I tried to write a book based on what had happened in Bristol after 1900. It was accepted and published by a publisher, but I never did like it. I could tell it wasn't me. I just didn't have my heart in it. And so I guess you'd call me an ancient historian, and that could be taken in two different directions. But as far as Bristol history, I like the old time, 1800s, and that's about it. I don't care for that farther back than that very much, but from 1852, when the city started, I like it. The last session, we had lessons on the earliest schools in Bristol, the lower grade schools, from children on up to the 8th grade, from what you'd call the first graders now, on up to the higher classes reaching 8. Now we're going to go above that and teach on the higher grade schools. Today there's a lot of emphasis put on education. I remember the time if you had a college degree, you were guaranteed a life work. No problem. But now there are thousands with college degrees that are out of work and can't find any. It isn't what it used to be. Now, I, for one, this is just a personal penchant of my own, but I don't put much stock in degrees. I don't talk much of degrees, and I'm certainly not impressed by them, because I know a person can have a string of degrees half a foot long and still not know much. It's wisdom that goes with the degrees that makes them worthwhile. As far as my own education, I seldom discuss it with anyone, but I have the same philosophy of old Dr. Nat T. Delaney, a legendary figure who lived long here in Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee. He died in 1940. He wrote a book or two. He's more of a philosopher than he was a physician. He's a good physician, but he liked to write books. He wrote one called Speaking of Accidents, which I have here in this old home and enjoy reading it sometimes over and over again. But somebody asked him one day about his education. He, like myself, didn't want to talk about it much, because I always feared somebody put too much stock in it. But he said this, and with him I fully agreed. Naturally, being a physician, he had to have education. He said, yes, I have some formal education. I have some deep, high education. Most of it I got since I graduated. Well, that's my theory. What I have, I think, mostly came after I graduated. And it's still going on. I'm still a student at my age. No, I'm not in school, I'm not enrolled. But I'm still teaching myself, reading and learning every day. I count the day lost unless I learn something new. So yes, there's a formal education back there, but most of my education came after I graduated. What about higher education in Bristol? We talked about the younger grades. Now there are young people, and some of them entered college when they were way all up in their 20s. People do that now. In fact, I know of a lady that graduated from college recently at the age of 75. And a man I helped get in Keene College is still going on for a master's degree now, and he's about 68. But there is a need for it. Keene College, still existing, is thought to be the oldest college in town, and as far as I know, it actually is, as a college per se. Now, there were some higher education schools before then, but they called them high schools. In fact, King started as a high school in 1867, but it soon became a full-fledged college. It was more or less founded by the Reverend James King, whose name it bears. However, the Presbyterian Presbytery had a big part in it. But he pushed the move and put it over the top by donating a large sum of money and also property, a big two-story house with several acres around it. That was now where what just recently was called King Pharmaceuticals. I think it has a new name now, but the place on 5th Street, the C.D. Tyler home, was a large two-story house. It had been owned, the land had been owned by James King, then sold it to his son-in-law, Joseph Anderson. Joseph Anderson sold it to C.D. Tyler. He built the house. Then he lost the house on a mechanic's lien. Anderson bought it back, and then King bought it back from him, so it changed hands right often there. But it was in that house located on the block where now sits the Medicine Pharmaceutical Company, whatever name it has now, and there is where the King College started. Years later, it was planned to move it out on, like somewhere out in the Fairmount section. They even had land for it out there, but it didn't go for some reason there. And then Isaac Anderson, who was the first child born in the town of Bristol, he gave what is now the present King College campus for the purpose of re-erecting the college out there. And so the location is there today. As was stated before, it started as a high school, but not for long. Within a short time, the need became evident for even higher grades, and thus we have King College. I have here a book that was used in King College. It's much older than the school itself, but evidently in the beginning they used whatever books they had or could find. And this book clearly, by people who know books, clearly it shows an earlier age than that. We turn to the front page here, and it is dated 1852. Well, of course, that was before King College started. But somehow it got to be used, and by that time, Professor James B. Crabtree had some connection with King. And this book, maybe he gave the book to the library, I don't know, but all I know is it came from King College. King grew, it had its ups and downs, many ups and downs, and there were times when it looked like it was lost, but some way it managed to survive and is still an active school today. I served long on its Board of Visitors and enjoyed working with it very much. It made me think so much of the college in Arkansas that took me on off the street when I was 15 years old and gave me a home and a job. And I have a very tender spot for that college today. Not long ago, a man working with a computer showed me the campus. I recognized some of the buildings. Old McLean Hall, where I lived in room 207, was there today just like it was then. Other new buildings were all over the campus, but that one still survives, and it was a joyous experience to see my first home away from home. Having left home at the age of 15, the school took me in and gave me a lot of foundation of what I now have in the way of education. Well, that wasn't the only college founded in Bristol. Long about 1868, 67, a woman came to town with the unusual name of Chauncellme. I've never heard the name before nor since, but that's the only pronunciation I can get for it. There may be other ways to pronounce it, but that's the only way I can get it. She rests in the old East Hill Cemetery here today. She started a private school for little children, first downtown, and then moved up on Cumberland Street on the hill here. Finally, it grew and it grew and it grew, until finally they turned it into a high school. They rented the old James King home, that's still part of which still stands at 54 King Street. And there they started what they called Mountain View High School. Indeed, it was a mountain view. I love to walk over there now and just stand and look at the distant mountains. It had a great view of the mountains to the southeast. And it began under that name, Mountain View High School. But strangely, even when it was a high school and even after it became a college, they had grades for young children. I've got a picture of the college when it was well underway. It had finally built a fine new building. And there were children in that picture. I used to wonder about it. Later I learned that yes, they did have children. They did teach children there. But of course that part went out. Finally it became a college. There was a great debate on what to call it. They didn't want to call it Mountain View College. That didn't sound too good to them. I think it'd been all right. But W.W. James, the father-in-law of the man who built this house, on whose porch we're sitting today, he had given a great deal of money to the cause and had also given a lot of his time and service to the cause. They almost called it James College, but that didn't go. Finally, David Sullins, a Methodist preacher who had come in to help Ms. Johnson, actually, it ought to have been named for her. She was the actual founder, if you want to trace it back to the root source. But he was given more credit for it, and so they called it Sullins College. Sullins College became a great institution, built a fine building, 3, 4, 5 stories high with a tower on it. It was ornamental to the town. It stood right behind what is now the library, our downtown Bristol Public Library. But the last day of 1915, New Year's Eve, about midnight, it caught fire. No one knows the cause to this day. It burned to the ground, and the school had to be absent, or they did not have a college for a couple of years. But the president of it, using his own money, he had just inherited some in Alabama. Land plantation had been sold, and he got most of it. So he used his own money to go way up on a hill at the end of Park Street and built the building that is there standing today. I understand that the college later got to where they could pay him back for his generosity, but he did finance the building that's there now. Well, unfortunately, we lost the school. I believe it closed in 1976, if I mistake not. Many a girl came here to go to school and found a husband, and some of them are my close friends right now, one with whom I work in the Historical Association and also in the Cemetery Association. Came from Illinois here and found her husband, and she's become one of the prominent residents of the town of Bristol now, and has done much for the city. There were other schools of higher learning, such as the Bristol Female Institute, which is actually a college. It was founded so the girls would have a place to go to school. King College was all boys until 1931 or 2, somewhere thereabout. And this school was founded as a twin, or so to speak, for King College. There needed to be a school for the girls. They built it up on the corner of where the old original schoolhouse had stood, on the very same corner, 5th and Shelby. And there it endured for a few years, but never could prosper for some reason. And so it didn't survive. And then, of course, we have VI College, which actually was moved here from Glade Springs, but I think it had its origin in Bristol. There was a school started for girls over on Anderson Street, and it suddenly moved to Glade Springs. And why it suddenly moved you can find in one of my books. My time is almost up and I don't have time to tell you. But you can read that in my first book of Bristol history, how this school was suddenly moved and went to Glade Springs. And I think, though there was a year of time when there was no school, I think it actually had its beginning in that little school. There's much more I could tell you about the higher education of Bristol, but we'll have to leave that to some other time. Until we meet again, may the best in life be yours.